His Manasoo, originally named Mikasa, was a steel-hulled Canadian passenger and package freighter in service between 1888 and 1928. She was built in 1888 in Port Glasgow, Scotland. During this time, she mainly carried passengers between Hamilton and Toronto, Ontario. Mikasa was lengthened in Collingwood, Ontario in 1905. She was sold twice before being sold to the Owen Sound Transportation Company Limited and was rebuilt and renamed Manasoo. After the sale, she mainly operated between Sault Ste. Marie and Owen Sound, Ontario. After a lucrative shipping season in 1928, Manasoo was opened to take on special commissions. On September 14, she left the Manitoulin Island port of Manitowoc, Ontario, under the command of Captain John Mackay. There were 19 crewmen, 2 passengers, 115 cows, and 1 bull on board. By the time Manasoo had cleared the north channel of Lake Huron, a sizable storm had developed. By 2:00 a.m. the next day, Manasoo had begun to list to port. Despite efforts to correct it, the list worsened. As she was off Griffith Island, Manasoo rolled over and sank. 5 crewmen and 1 passenger climbed onto a life raft. One of the crew later died of exposure, while the rest were rescued by the steamer Manitoba. 16 people died in the wreck. The location of Manasoo's wreck was unknown for nearly 90 years until it was found on June 30, 2018, by Jerry Eliason and Ken Merriman of Minnesota and Chris Cole of Windsor, Ontario. The wreck rests intact in 210 feet, 64.0 meters of water, with its stern embedded in the lake bottom. Beginning in the mid-1840s, Canadian companies began importing iron vessels prefabricated by shipyards in the United Kingdom. It would not be until 1889, however, that the first steel-hulled Canadian ship, Manitoba, was built on the Great Lakes. In 1887, the Hamilton Steamboat Company, a fleet managed by Tunis Bruce Griffith of Hamilton, Ontario, placed an order for a steel steamship with William Hamilton, a shipyard located on the banks of the River Clyde in Port Glasgow, Scotland. Hull number 64, built at William Hamilton Company's Glen Yard, was christened Mikasa. She was licensed to carry 536 passengers and was equipped with an elegant interior consisting of carved polished hardwood panels, velvet sofas, silk curtains, and velvet carpets. She was also equipped with electric lights. Her main deck was completely enclosed, while her promenade deck was almost completely open, save for a small cabin. She had a single tall mast located forward of her pilot house. Mikasa was clinker built. Her hull was 155 feet, 47.2 meters long. Her beam was 24.1 feet, 7.3 meters wide, while her hull was 16.3 feet, 5.0 meters. Some sources state 16 feet, 5.9. Mikasa had a gross tonnage of 574 tons and a net tonnage of 459 tons. She was powered by 2 410 horsepower, 310 kilowatt, 135 RPM triple expansion steam engines. The cylinders of the engines were even inches, 18 inches, and 29 inches. Steam for the engine was provided by a single coal-fired 12.6 by 10.9 boiler, which had a working pressure of 150 pounds per square inch. The engine was built by William Kemp of Glasgow, Scotland, while the boiler was manufactured by Burnett Company of Govan. Mikasa had a top speed of 18 knots, 20.7 miles per hour, and was propelled by 2 fixed-pitch propellers. Mikasa was accepted by the Hamilton Steamboat Company after she completed her sea trials on the River Clyde. She was registered in Glasgow, Scotland on May 2, 1888, and left for Hamilton on May 16. Mikasa's trip across the Atlantic Ocean took 15 days as ice slowed her progress. After Mikasa arrived in Hamilton on the morning of June 7, she was given the Canadian official number 932,932 on June 29, 1888, when she was registered in Hamilton. For most of her career, she was engaged in the passenger trade between Hamilton and Toronto, Ontario. Early in her career, She also stopped at Lorne Park, Oakville, and Burlington Beach, Ontario. While in Hamilton on August 11, 1892, a deckhand on board Mikasa leaned against a gangway whilst trying to fill a bucket of water, fell overboard and drowned. She made a 39-mile, 62.8 kilometers, trip between Burlington and Port Dalhousie, Ontario, on April 6, 1894, and an hour and 50 minutes. In an effort to make Mikasa more profitable, she was sent to the Collingwood Shipbuilding Company. Her hull became 178.4 feet, 54.4 m long, her gross tonnage 529 tons, her net tonnage 234 tons, and her carrying capacity 1,500 long tons. The reason behind the reduction of her tonnage after the lengthening, the new piece was inserted between her pilothouse and funnel. Officers' quarters were constructed behind the pilothouse. The cabin on the promenade deck was enlarged. Her mast was moved behind the pilothouse, and the second mast was installed aft. The lengthening significantly decreased Mikasa's length to beam ratio, causing her to roll badly even in moderate weather. On September 19, 1906, a deckhand on board Mikasa lost his foot after it became entangled in a mooring line while she was in Hamilton. In 1911, the Hamilton Steamboat Company merged into the Niagara Navigation Company, a company that operated passenger ships between Toronto and various Niagara River ports. In 1912, the Niagara Navigation Company was absorbed into the Richelieu, Ontario Navigation Company, which itself was merged into the Canada Transportation Company of Montreal, Quebec, on June 11, 1913. The Canada Transportation Company was renamed Canada Steamship Lines later in 1913. Late in the summer of 1912, Mikasa ran a special service from Cobourg, Port Hope, Bowmanville, and Oshawa, Ontario, to Toronto, where she ferried passengers to and from the Canadian National Exhibition. While with Canada Steamship Lines, Mikasa frequently traveled between Grimsby, Ontario, Hamilton, and Toronto. She was used as the official boat for the Wrigley Marathon Swim. At the end of the 1927 shipping season, Mikasa was laid up in Toronto. In the winter of 1927, Mikasa was sold to the Owen Sound Transportation Company. Mikasa was renamed Manasoo, a combination of Manitoulin Island and Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Her promenade deck was covered with passenger cabins and her pilothouse and masts were replaced. After her rebuild, she was licensed to carry only 70 passengers. Manasoo left Toronto for Owen Sound on April 22, 1928. Along the way, she stopped in Goderich, Lions Head, and Wyton, Ontario, before arriving in Owen Sound on April 27, after which she traveled to Collingwood, where she was dry docked for an inspection. After entering service in May, she mainly operated between Sault Ste. Marie and Owen Sound via the North Channel. Manasoo carried passengers in various different types of freight. After the lucrative 1928 shipping season, Manasoo was open to special commissions. Cowman Donald Wallace of Oil Springs, Ontario, and his friend Thomas Lambert drove to Owen Sound, where they boarded Manasoo. Wallace had planned to purchase cattle from several farmers from around Manitoulin Island. Under the command of Captain John Ross Mackay, Manasoo began her voyage on September 11th. She sailed to Little Current, Ontario, then to West Bay, Ontario, where she loaded 18 more cows to add to the herd of cows purchased from around Manitoulin Island. And then she proceeded to Manitowoning, Ontario. She left Manitowoning for Owen Sound at 12:00 p.m. on September 14 with 19 crewmen, 2 passengers, 115 cows, and 1 hull on board. By the time Manasoo had cleared the North Channel of Lake Huron, a sizable storm with 25 miles per hour, by 2:00 a.m. the next day, Manasoo had begun to list to port. Captain Mackay eventually decided to beach Manasoo on nearby Griffith Island. Eventually, Manasoo's starboard bilge lifted out of the water, causing water to leak in through gangways and other openings. First Mate Oswald Oz long ordered the lifeboats launched, although only one lifeboat was launched before Manasoo rolled over onto her port side and sank stern first. Manasoo sank in 3 to 5 minutes. The only lifeboat launched capsized. A life raft broke loose when Manasoo sank. Captain Mackay, First Mate Long, Chief Engineer Thomas McCutcheon, Purser Arthur Middleborough, Oiler Roy Fox, and Wallace were able to climb aboard. McCutcheon died of exposure, and his clothes were distributed among the survivors. After floating on the raft for 60 hours, the survivors were rescued by the Canadian Pacific Railway steamer Manitoba. 16 of the 21 people on board died, although the specific reason for Manasoo's sinking remains unknown. The shifting of the cattle is believed to be partly responsible. It was rumored that Manasoo had previously been discovered by a diver resting in 150 feet, 45.7 meters of water, 0.5 miles, 0.8 kilometers from shore. Her wreck was discovered on June 30, 2018, after a 4-day search using side-scan sonar by shipwreck hunters Jerry Eliason and Ken Merriman of Minnesota and maritime historian Chris Cole of Windsor. Eliason and Merriman had unsuccessfully tried to locate her in 2017. After searching more than 30 square miles, 77.7 square kilometers, of water, Cole suggested that they look closer to shore. He had found a newspaper account published in 1928, which stated that Manasoo's wreck had been located a few weeks after she sank. The wreck of Manasoo rests in 210 feet, 64.0 meters of water, 0.5 miles, 0.8 kilometers off Griffith Island. The wreck is intact, although encrusted with zebra mussels, with its stern buried in the lake bottom and the bow pointing upwards at a 10-deg to 15-deg angle. The pilot house and helm are intact. Manasoo's collapsed funnel and 2 of her lifeboats are located on her deck, while another lies next to her wreck. Also within the wreck is Wallace's 1927 Chevrolet Coupe, with its number plates still attached. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to please like and subscribe. If you have a topic you would like to suggest, leave a comment.